Today on Parts Hold, we are going to talk about something that I think that everyone's really going to get a kick out of and learn a lot from, but we are going to talk about how to get along with a service manager when they're bad or when they are being replaced every 3 months. So as a parts manager, how do you get along with that person that is in the revolving door or when they just are a waste of food and air? We're also going to talk about Cliff and why he is fighting a bout of depression and also his limited days on the earth and much, much more coming up today on Parts Hold.
Here to fill the order.
Man, Cliff, you look a little down today, brother. Are you okay?
I'm a little bit tired, and something's happened recently. Well, it's multiple layers to it, but some things have come out.
This sounds like it could go a really crazy direction, so I like it. Let's do it.
I'm coming to grips with my morality.
Morality or mortality?
Mortality, yeah, that's what. That's the one. Well, that any morality is too.
If it's one thing I've never questioned, it's your morality. Like you're super honest. Like I feel like you're a shirt off the back guy. You're a great neighbor. You're a great father, great husband. But your morality is not in question.
Mortality is definitely come into play.
Now we're getting somewhere. I like that. I'm probably having a little moment like that too.
And I don't know. Maybe it's that I'm getting older.
And just for the audience, how old are you?
I'm 47. I will be 48 this year.
Yes.
Maybe it's that my daughter is moving into her senior year of high school.
Well, yeah, that's that empty nester thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, I really don't know. I mean, we've had kids for 23 years. I mean, it's kind of a weird feeling to think about that another year potentially. And if she were to decide to go off to college, here we are, trying to figure out life together. But another thing's happened to me recently.
Okay, well, let's not get to that yet. First, I want to talk about Brooklyn, and has she alluded to what her intentions are after she graduates?
Yeah, I mean, she wants to be a school teacher, and so college is in the cards. She's trying to determine whether she wants to do like a community college to get the basic stuff done and then go off to a 4-year school. So we're just kind of debating that right now. It's looking more and more like that's probably going to be the case.
Okay. Do you have a preference?
No, I don't. With my older son, when he went off, I preferred for him to go off. Maybe some distance. I thought it would help him.
Kind of because he needed to become a man type thing?
It's the first one, when he left, first. So I felt like it was better on him, my wife, specifically because, if they're right around the corner, you're smothering them. And so I feel like a little bit more for him. She's a little bit different as dad, and I'm sure there's some dads that can identify with me out there. I don't want her going very far, that I don't no longer have control.
That's an illusion either way.
I understand that.
Okay. I'm just trying to help you through this as your friend.
I get it. It's like, so the other day, so we're looking for her a car, and I was talking to the neighbor, and they had some friends over. And I said, we're, went to go look at a car this weekend. They were like, oh, wow, car, then a boyfriend. I said, let's ease up on the boyfriend talk.
Has she ever had a serious boyfriend?
No. If we were to pick up the phone, which would be an interesting call and be very humorous, she would tell you I'm the only man that she needs. And the way I look at it, until that young man can buy her the things that I can buy her, she doesn't need them.
Wow. That's unrealistic, right?
Maybe it should be.
Okay. And then also kind of recapping too, and your youngest son went off to the service and is actually, I think he's poised to have a phenomenal career. And I think he's going to be, he's already a great kid, but I think that he's going to do some really special things. And I think that Brooklyn probably will end up being a really, really good teacher. My thought is this on community college versus going away to school is that if you're comfortable that the maturity is there and there's no scholarships available, then the community college makes sense from a financial standpoint. But they're two very, very different experiences. Now, I think the harder part is when you think that you're going to be way more mature when you do community college and then go to the 4-year university. But the truth is that at some point in time, there's going to be that I'm away from home thing. And I don't think there's anything you can do to kind of stop that other than instilling the great things that you've done throughout your time of raising her from 0 to, is she almost 17 now?
She's 17.
She is 17 now. So then my thought is, and this might throw you for a loop, is that so everything that you've had, you kind of control from 0 to 17. And then as she goes into the 18 and then 19 and 20, if goes to community college, all the lessons you teach her start to become secondary to her peers. So if she goes to college next year, then that'll be closer to your child rearing. As opposed to if she goes to community college, maybe she picks up some stuff from people that aren't you, and then she carries that into that whole first time away from home experience. And I feel like if she's going to have an away from home experience, I want it to be as close to your and Jamie's upbringing as possible. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I think one of the things that happens, so you alluded to my middle one. My middle son called me today. He started his in-depth training now. And so we were just having a discussion on that. He kind of, went into a real light day today. But one of the things that happens, and maybe this would even take this conversation a little bit further. So there's multiple things that happen when you're in high school and you move on to life after high school. Is what I'll call that. There becomes a disconnect, and you've almost, not necessarily that you feel let down, but there is kind of that downward spin where you're not sure where you kind of fit in. And so there's another layer of growing up. And then that also happens once you come out of college. It's happening with my oldest one now, that he spent his entire life around this one thing. And now that one thing's no longer a part of his life, and he's trying to figure out where he fits. So the conversation with my middle one was, he's been around a group of individuals for 2 years on a ship and doing the thing and spending time together and weekends and training and all the things that's happened. Well, now he's no longer with that group. And for the past 2 months, he's kind of had that disconnect, that it's kind of almost a letdown, that the brotherhood is kind of separated. So I think for her, the next year is it's pivotal.
Yeah, exactly. So I think you have your work cut out for you, but I also think that everyone's like, why are we talking about this? But I think that this conversation leads us really well into our discussion today. And essentially, this is a really, really good episode for any parts manager that has a service manager that is terrible or that they don't get along with, or what is happening in more and more cases. I hear it a lot. I bet Cliff hears it a lot too, is what to do when the service manager office is actually a revolving door. And the reason why there's a connection between what we were talking about with Cliff and raising children and getting them to grow up, and the service managers that we don't, that were terrible, we don't get along with, or they're just the revolving door, is, to me, I think what it is from a parts manager perspective is that there's training and influence. And sometimes, I don't know, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I believe that parts managers could impart their influence on the store and the service department way more than they naturally do or even think they could.
I would say that is a great segue into the list that we have, because there's a couple things that you've touched on right there that are very, very key on what they do with either that manager that they don't get along with, or that revolving door, as you called it. which let's call it what it is. Most of the time, the steadier, more stable people, or longevity wise in the store is in the parts.
They're in parts. Do you know what the turnover rate is for service managers in our industry right now?
Don't know what that is right now.
50%.
Wow.
So we've curated a list, and we're going to it'll be a back and forth a little bit. So Cliff's going to kind of kick us off with what he thinks is, this is just kind of a list of tips to handle either the revolving door or the service manager that just sucks. So
equally, you can use them the same for the same scenario.
Yeah, I think the hardest part is that with the manager that's getting fired every 3 months, is that on the parts manager side is I could totally see where there'd be some frustration because you keep doing the same thing over and over with a different body in there, to the point where it's like you could go and do some of these tips that we came up, but there's got to be a thing in the back of your head that might be like, why bother, because you're not going to be here in 3 months.
I've actually heard someone tell the manager that I'm not going to worry about it because you're not going to be here in 3 months.
So start us off.
So number one, I think you have to embrace common ground, or as we would lovingly like to call it, pet the dog.
In Chris Collins' world, that is pet the dog. Exactly right. So unpack that a little bit for us. What are some things that we could do as a parts manager to try to make that connection?
Well, I think I've got to value the person and the employee, and then I've got to just kind of start getting to know them a little bit better. The conversation that we had at the start, as best I remember, if I reflect back for what now feels like in dog years, 12 to 15, the conversation you and I first had on our first interview was a lot about family and a lot about you as a person and me as a person. And it was just that getting to know each other and figure out what kind of common ground that we have, that we could have a conversation, a real conversation, that we could, you and I get along on multiple levels. But I just think about when I was working in a store and dealing with the different people, that once I found out about them and that they're real people, I looked through some of the other stuff and could find the common ground where we were, whether it's being a fan of racing or being a fan of football or just being a family man. Maybe it's fishing, maybe it's hunting. There's a connection there that you can make, that you can have something to build on, even though you don't necessarily see eye to eye on everything.
Yeah, and you don't have to, I think, right? So I think that the thing is I believe if you haven't made a connection with someone, it's way more about effort than a lack of a common ground.
Yeah.
Do you know what my favorite thing about you from our first interview was?
It's my I eat fish almost every day.
No, that's not my favorite thing. I think that's freaky, but and I didn't learn that on the interview.
But I have my own song about that.
Yeah, that's true. But you are one of the most coachable people I've ever met in my life, and you let me coach you on our interview.
Oh yeah, it's true.
And you actually went back and made changes in your store, based on our conversation. And just so you know, I was done. I was in on you from that moment on. But you were so coachable and humble. And even though you'd had some really, really great success, there was still like a super endearing humility, which I think your clients get. And I think that you put an amazing coaching product on the table for the clients in parts and service. So that's the nicest thing I'll ever say to anybody. So moving on. So first is connecting with that customer. And then the thing that I would say that if I had to give advice to a parts manager for that person, it's like, I don't know, there's so many things that we can say that are from out of the realm of the automotive industry is that, like, let's say that you've got a neighbor that you can't get along with, or if it's a PTA, or like there's 10 other things. I think that the second that you accept and recognize that you're better together, it'll change the the way that you approach stuff, right? Now, it's easy to say that person's a jerk and write them off and then just say the relationship's just going to be rocky and we're not going to get along. Nobody wins. The dealership doesn't win. The customer doesn't win. We don't win as individuals. We don't win as departments by just saying that we're just too different. We can't get along. I think that understanding that the two units, that parts and service working together, is the best case scenario for everybody involved. That's where things start to change, and it increases your effort level. Yeah, it's not quite as good as the next one that you have, because I think a lot of people are going to relate to this.
Well, I think that it, like we're building a cake.
Oh yeah, are we on like layer 2 or something?
Sure. Yeah, we kind of made it, and now we're layering it. Yeah.
Yep. And then the last thing we do is the frosting.
Yeah. Well, we might want some sprinkles on it.
I love frosting.
I think one of the things that's unique about, well, having you as a boss, unique about our company and unique about the way we coach, is that everyone has a voice. And I think what happens in the area where there's not no one getting along and there's a revolving door, we certainly as parts managers tend to sit back and think that we don't have a voice. And if we do, we think that we're, maybe stepping on toes or whatever. But there's a way to have a voice, and no one can read our mind. And so we have to be able to be vocal about that and have that conversation with other people. I think that that's vital to being successful.
Do you think that could that be parts managers waiting for permission?
If it is, if you're a parts manager out there, maybe we need to give you permission that you have a voice. I think the voice of the parts managers out there, because it is stable, the stability there, you have a voice, and we can have a conversation and still disagree. That's okay.
Totally. Yep. I think that the reason I ask that is because I think about, like, if I had to generalize most parts managers, a word that I would use to describe them is compliant. And my fear would be is that if by speaking their mind and stating their opinion that they would be perceived as non-compliant. And I think that that's not true. I think that really at the end of the day, parts managers come up with some of the best ideas. And I think that they just go unheard because either, we don't get in a position as parts managers to where people listen to us, or we don't even say it because we think that our opinion isn't of interest to people. But that would be a huge mistake.
And I think in just a minute we're going to cover that. That's going to offer that freedom.
Yeah, for sure. So the next thing on our list is that I believe that is department heads, parts managers, and the service manager. And like I said, you might do this with one manager. They might crap out in 3 months and you have to do it again. But I think common goals and really like financial statement reviews or any kind of number review that you guys have access to, doing that together and seeing what the relationship is from one to the other. And what I've seen in most cases is if one department loses, the other department's usually not far behind. And if a department does really well, usually the parts department and service department both are kind of lifting each other up. So that common goal, I think that in setting them together, and I don't know, if I was a general manager, I would actually have parts and service manager would have skin in the game for each department a little bit. Doesn't have to be the full on amount, but to a point where I'm vested in what's going on in the service department if I'm in parts. That's what I would do, is that common goal and be willing to review the financials and the numbers.
Yeah. So I was thinking about it when you said it. A daily sheet for parts departments. There's a couple of stores that often send their daily sheets in, and I was having a conversation with a parts manager recently, and he said, "Well, I'm improving in every area that I have control over."
Oh, that's a loaded statement,
and it kind of hurt me a little bit because I wanted him to understand that he helps do that. Now, this is a store that has had some revolving, a little bit of revolving door in the service department. So there is a little bit of thing there, but I would want him to understand that his success is contingent on the success of the other. Just like you stated, they kind of elevate each other up. And if one is dragging the other one, or if one is dragging down, they're dragging the other one. But
Yeah,
it's very, it's very rare that one's elevated really, really high and the other one's not.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that they're looked on from the ownership and GM. They're looked on as fixed operations.
So that brings us into the next one. And I would want to do a little bit of self-reflection and try to determine, am I part of the problem?
How hard is that?
I think I think you got to be really, really honest with yourself, and you need to look in the mirror and determine. There have been numerous stores, and I'm sure you know many, where one or the other manager has sabotaged the other departments.
Oh, yeah.
And I think about that. It probably happened more years ago than it does now, because things were a little bit different years ago. But I'll bet if there's some old school parts managers, they can remember a time where, you just didn't help each other, period.
Yeah, they thinking that they're on their own.
Yeah, that I've got control of my own money or whatever. But the reality is, one doesn't happen without the other.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. So have that honest conversation with yourself about whether or not you're the problem. I love that.
Make a list of it. Say, okay, here's the areas where, I'm.
Oh.
And here's an area where I'm not an asset. Make that list and be truthful with yourself. If you're not going to be truthful with yourself, I think you're wasting your time. But I think if you're truthful with yourself, it's probably going to reveal some areas that you could be a lot better in.
Yeah, or even coming up, list what are the things, like what are the problems that I'm having at work? And then is there anything that I am not doing that I could be doing to make the problem better? You would uncover a lot doing both of those exercises. That's pretty cool.
Kind of makes me think about the time where you do a task list for the day and see where you're getting spent.
I'd love to do that. Now instead of a task list, it's just my calendar. It's like I totally live and die by my calendar. Like I don't even set my own appointments anymore.
Yeah, wow.
You actually can't, and you know this, right? Because you can't call me and get on my calendar.
No.
Because if I do it, what do? Do you know?
I would say overbook.
I just tell everybody yes. I'll help you. Of course, whatever you want, right?
We become not useful.
Yeah, because I think that day runs you at the end of it. But I've had to definitely get to a point where super intentional about the time. It's another good lesson for any kind of a manager or leader, is that the time is precious. So we got one more thing.
Yeah, I kind of want to do like a drum roll, and then you were to say it or I say it, whatever. But this one's vital, man. This one's big. This is huge.
So I think that this is one of those things that when I say it, it'll sound common sense, but not every parts manager thinks about it. But if you've got instability, if you've got a terrible person in the service department, the best way to make that work in your favor is to become their boss. So that's where you want to start thinking about becoming the parts and service director and really, really knowing knowing exactly what their strengths and weaknesses are, and then they report to you. And that's something that Cliff did actually in his career, is that he went from parts manager to running parts and service. And I think that he was probably way more effective getting everything he needed done when he was in charge of both departments, because I think you're being graded on both anyway. So it just makes sense that you would fall into that position.
I think that stating that though is probably a little bit, there's probably some parts managers out there who've never thought about that. But I think that they need to think bigger. I
agree. Yeah, the fact that they might think they're not qualified, but they're way more qualified than they think.
Yeah, and I think, if we were to go back to the list, finding that common ground and setting goals together and going through the financial, it'll open up some guys' minds.
I would agree with you.
Yeah.
That's great. That's that's a good list. So I'm just going to kind of hit the high points really quickly. So we've got the first thing on there is petting the dog. Accept that you're better together. No one can read your mind. Come up with common goals and review financials. Making sure that you're not part of the problem. And then finally, if it's too much for you to bear, just become the boss. So that is our list for today on ways to get along and make things work with the service manager, either when they suck or they're new every 3 months. So that'll do it for all of us today here on Parts Hold.
Here to fill the order.